Watches come in all shapes and sizes, but what is the right size? Today we're going to share 3 tips with you to help get the perfect fit. Hey guys, welcome back to the Shreve Crump and Low YouTube channel. I'm your host Jack Tyler, and today we're going to be talking watch sizing and how it can potentially affect your relationship with your watch. With the ever-growing list of brands selling online, it can sometimes be difficult to know if the watch will even fit right without trying it on your wrist. After all, if you don't have the ability to try it on in person, how can you know for sure? All too often, we see a rendering online and rush to order just to find out that the watch is either a little bit too big or a little bit too small. Now, this guide will give you some reference when it comes time to pull the trigger. I know that in my experience, just a few millimeters can make a world of difference on the wrist, so I've come up with a list of 3 tips to help you get the right fit the first time. So without further ado, let's jump into tip number 1. Our first tip is a simple one. Evaluate what type of watch wearer you are. Are you a traditionalist or do you prefer a more tactical look? Do you like the weight of a heavy watch or do you prefer something a little bit lighter? These are important questions to answer before you go ahead and spend thousands of dollars on a watch that you might not even end up wearing that much. Really think about your lifestyle and imagine yourself wearing the watch during your daily activities. Thinking about where and when you're going to use the watch will help you figure out what elements of sizing are most important to you. I think it's easy to forget as enthusiasts that watches really are at a crossroads between industrial design and jewelry. And so you need to consider how that watch is going to fit into your wardrobe, as it is an accessory to what you're wearing. Now, if you're someone who likes to take their watches mountain climbing, then you probably aren't going to be looking for a dainty dress watch like this tiny Cartier. You're probably looking for something more robust and easy to read. This would mean that you're in the market for a larger watch. Or on the flip side, if you're constantly in the boardroom, you're likely looking for something small enough to slide easily under your shirt cuff. Now, I think it's important to mention that tool watches can definitely be worn in some formal situations, and dress watches can be worn with a t-shirt and jeans. The lines are a lot more blurred now in terms of what goes with what, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't understand the basics of traditional pairings. Now that brings us to our second tip, which is number 2, measure everything. Our second tip may seem obvious, but it's a really important step in finding the right fit. You'll want to measure everything, and I really do mean everything. Most people are just aware of the case size when they're looking at a watch measurement, but there are so many other factors that can dramatically change how the watch is going to wear. First off, start by measuring your wrist with a tape measure so you know exactly how large your wrist actually is. You also want to take a look at the general shape of your wrist too. Some of us have wrists shaped more like ovals, whereas others might have a more rounded wrist, and this is really going to affect how the watch sits on top of your wrist. This is especially important when considering watches that are non-traditional shapes, such as a JLC Reverso or a Patek Gondolo, which we reviewed in an earlier video, where the size is determined by the lug-to-lug dimension rather than the diameter. You'll also want to measure the case of the watch. When it comes to round watches, we feel that a wrist 5 inches and under should consider wearing a watch between 24 and 34 millimeters in their outer diameter of the case, and those with a 5 to 6 inch wrist, we usually suggest 34 to 38 millimeters. And when you're over 6 inches, between 6 and 7, we recommend anywhere from 38 to 42. And for 7 inches plus, we suggest a minimum of 42 millimeters. Now, those are just general guidelines for comfort purposes, but let's go ahead and show you a few different sized wrists with the same watch on so you can really get an idea how differently watches can wear. This is a 42 millimeter Omega Seamaster. We're going to show it to you on a couple different wrists. First, let's go ahead and show it on a 5.5 inch wrist. And notice how the lugs are protruding over the wrist and the watch just honestly looks a little bit cartoonish. In addition, just for fun, we want to show you some extremes. We have a 47 millimeter Breitling and a 33 millimeter Longa. We're going to show you them on a couple different wrists just so you can see how a watch in a picture might not look the same once you actually strap it on. Now, it's one thing to wear a dramatically oversized watch kind of as a fashion statement, but if you're investing a lot of money in a watch, you also want it to be comfortable. And when you have the lugs overhanging off the sides of your wrist, you're also really running the risk of banging it into stuff a lot more easily than if the watch fit more correctly. Now, another important measurement is the spacing between the lugs. Now, the lugs are the little arms that come come off of the case which holds the strap. Now, this determines how large your strap or bracelet will be, and it can sometimes be deceiving by the numbers alone. Now, on the Seamaster, we have a pretty standard lug-to-lug width, which is 20 millimeters, and that means that the strap and the bracelet are going to be 20 millimeters at the top where they connect to the watch. This is where things differ, however. Now, some bracelets and straps actually taper down to a small millimeter where they meet the clasp, and this greatly reduces the size of the bracelet, making it easier to wear on smaller wrists. In my experience, a tapered bracelet or strap can make a huge difference in the presentation of the watch. It can make a watch that seemingly might be too big for your wrist wear a lot more comfortably, and vice versa. If you have a watch that seems a little bit small, putting a non-tapered bracelet or strap on it can beef it up a little bit. Just to prove it, I'm going to show you the exact same watch, one with a tapered rubber strap and one with a non-tapered metal bracelet on my wrist so that you can see how they wear significantly differently. Now, moving on to the thickness. This is a dimension a lot of us forget about, but it ends up being one of those important aspects of how a watch is going to wear. Now, the thickness determines how high the watch will sit on top of your wrist. In my opinion, between 8 and 14 millimeters is usually the sweet spot for most wrists, and anything larger than that and you start to get into tuna can territory, and it's certainly going to get hung up if you're wearing a dress shirt. Now, this can be tricky when looking at chronographs in particular because the movements are much larger to handle that complication, and therefore the cases tend to follow suit. This is one aspect where it's really best to try the watch on in person before deciding to buy. Now, for our last measurement, you'll want to check what size the dial is compared to the case. Watches with a dive bezel inherently wear a little smaller than their case size might suggest because of the size of the bezel taking up a little bit more real estate on the case. Similarly, watches that are mostly dial will tend to wear a little bit larger than their nominal case size. This means that a 36 millimeter diver is going to wear a lot smaller on the wrist than a 36 millimeter time-only dress piece. Hey guys, just want to take a quick second to say thank you for watching today's video. If you want to see more content like this, just remember to hit that comment and subscribe button, and remember that we are giving away a $1,000 watch to celebrate our 1,000 subscribers. Now, to enter that contest and get your hands on that free watch, follow us on our Instagram page at SCO Watch Salon, and make sure to leave a comment on this video below because we're going to choose a winner based randomly on the comments. But enough about that giveaway, let's go ahead and jump into our third tip on watch sizing. Tip number 3 is try on similar watches. My last tip is actually to get you to go out to your local AD or watch salon and try some pieces on, making notes of stuff that works and stuff that doesn't. Even if they don't have the model you're looking for, they probably have something that wears similarly to what you may have been pining for online. Now, in my own personal experience, I actually thought that I would never be able to wear a Panerai. It was a watch that I admired from afar, but it just seemed like it was going to be way too big for my wrist based on the numbers. And it wasn't until I actually tried one on here at Shreve that I realized that not only did it fit, but it fit perfectly. This was my first experience with a larger, more chunky watch, and it's something that I really wouldn't have even considered without trying one on. So whenever you get the experience, having a watch in the metal and on your wrist is really going to take it over the top to give you the confidence you need to buy a new watch. Another great way to get some hands-on experience with watches is to join a local watch group and go to meetups. For instance, we recently had a watches and whiskey event here at Shreve, and I got to check out a lot of pieces that I probably would never have seen otherwise. It's so much fun to get to try on watches in a low-pressure environment like that, and it really lets you get to know the owners, the stories behind the pieces, and it's going to give you, again, a lot of knowledge and experience without you having to actually make the purchase first. Now, in the case that you are not located near a watch salon or don't have access to group meetups, then buying something a little less expensive than the watch you're looking at, like a Seiko for instance, with similar specs might be helpful in the decision-making process. This is a great way to try out different sizes because you'll actually be able to get a sense of how it fits into your everyday life without breaking the bank. And if you find out you don't like the size, then you saved yourself a major multi-$1,000 purchase. Well, I really hope that these tips have at least helped expand your knowledge of all the different factors that go into how a watch fits besides just the case size. You have to look at the shape of the case. Even the material can make a difference. The shape of the lugs and the bracelet can really have an impact in the overall wearability and how it's going to fit into your personal style and wardrobe. Whenever you get the opportunity to try on a new watch, even if it's not something you're considering buying, try to approach it with an open mind and take away the things that you like to help inform your decision down the road. Now, of course, all the watches that we featured in today's video are available on our website, shrevecrumpandlow.com, and if you're in the neighborhood, make sure to stop by our 39 Newberry Street location. My name is Jack Tyler from Shreve Crump and Low, and once again, thanks for spending a little time with us here today.